This week, we have another episode of ExploreVM Live. This episode was recorded at the Indy VMUG UserCon in July. I was fortunate enough to pin down four great folks for a conversation about their VCDX journey. I hope you enjoy. All right, hello everybody, and welcome to a special live edition of the ExploreVM podcast here at the Indy VMUG UserCon. I'm just going to have everyone go in the circle and introduce themselves, and we're just going to dive right in.
Hi, my name is Eric Wright. I'm kidding. So my name is Rebecca Fitzhugh. You can find me on Twitter at Rebecca Fitzhugh. That's it.
Hi. No, my name is Rebecca Fitzhugh.
Dang it.
My name's Sean Massey. You can find me on Twitter at Sean P. Massey. And to the next to me is my cohort,
Rebecca Fitzhugh. You had this coming. This is Mike Burkhart. I am on Twitter at Mike. Nope, that's not it. I do Twitter sometimes. VMikeB. And on to the next.
And my name is Eric Wright. I am found on Twitter. I'm at not Rebecca Fitzhugh. Otherwise known as at Disco Posse. That's the easiest way to find me.
So what we're really doing here today is we're playing a special ExploreVM edition of To Tell the Truth. No, just kidding.
All right, so unlike what Sean said, what we're about to do is we're just going to have like an open discussion about the VCDX process from people at varying points in their journey, and see where it's taking them in their career, and like what is it doing for their jobs as they train for it. So let's start with Mike. Explain where you're at with your process with VCDX.
Yeah, so I started my journey back. Was it March of last year? February of last year?
Yeah. Well, so I guess to start this off, I think we should say Mike and I worked on our VCDX together. We initially started the process at the same time, and we wrote our initial design together as a team. Mm-hmm. And that was about March of last year, I think. February, something like that. It was right about when you had your baby.
Yeah, so March, maybe.
Sounds like a poor decision. Have baby, do VCDX.
So that brings up a very good point. So first off in the process, if you have children, I hope you have an understanding spouse or lots of relatives, and Eric knows all about that.
Amen.
Eric is the understanding spouse in this scenario.
That's right.
Right now I'm actually gearing up for my third defense coming up in application in September.
3's the lucky number.
3 is the lucky number. That is true.
So you're going to kill it.
Yeah, I'm ready. And if I'm not, I'll do it a fourth time, I guess.
And maybe I want to ask a question before we even get rolling, because we never get a chance to hear about this necessarily in the community. What do you take from the first and second defenses to into the third? Like, what did you... now you're at the third run. How much feedback do you get to be able to take forward to the next one, and how much is different? Because it's different panelists. It's a lot of everything's different, but there's obviously a rubric of not the
not the company, but the other
as a teaching thing.
Subtle shout out.
Right. There's a set of criteria,
a framework
that is a measurement of what the process is. And I'm Canadian, so I say process and project. But what did you learn from 1 and 2 that you believe you can take into number 3?
So I think, and Sean and Rebecca back me up on this too. My first defense, my experience was very typical of people going in blind, which is I was very technical. I was prepared for all of the gotchas and pitfalls and whatnot, but realistically, I was not focused on the task at hand, which was really, taking business requirements, risk constraints, assumptions, developing your, conceptual, logical, physical, and ensuring that each one of your silos are filled out and well fleshed and well thought out, which is realistically what all business and enterprise architecture is. You have to ensure that you're meeting the business needs, you're designing for appropriate use cases, and so the first time I was turning all the nerd knobs and saying, look at me go, and the panelists were like, well, so how does that fit the use case? And I would go, what? And so the first time out, I received a lot of feedback basically saying that, right? Basically saying your solutions architecture was very interesting in certain areas, meaning not wrong, but different choices could
You
have
need
been made
but
to shore
better
up.
justify.
Exactly. The second time around was I had a little bit of better bearing on it, but I wrote my design on the whiteboard with Sharpie markers. So
Instant fail.
yeah, that I don't know where that flies on the rubric, but it might not be good.
So
say my name. Say my name.
No,
So-
I would say that my first defense was kind of similar, I guess, in a way to Mike's. I feel that I did the best I could with the knowledge that I had, but it simply wasn't good enough. I definitely don't feel like I bombed it. However, I realize now that I wasn't showing that I was an architect. I was talking at a very technical, physical level because that's where I'm most comfortable, right? I'm very comfortable talking about the technology, not as comfortable talking about the process, as Eric would say. And so I didn't show that I had a methodology. I didn't show that I had any framework in my head, right? I wasn't doing a good job of pulling my design decisions back to a requirement. And so I failed. So I did it again.
You know, I would say I agree with Mike and Rebecca. You know, I went into it twice before I passed. So I passed on the second attempt. And yeah, the first time it was more technical. You know, my approach to it was more technical. I wasn't as focused on, you know, solving the business problems. But at the same time, I don't think I went into it as prepared as I should have been, right? You know, going into it, the defenses were middle of summer. I had other stuff going on at the time, so I wasn't doing as many mock defenses as I should have been. You know, I didn't have my presentations as ready. And actually, the night before, I literally flew across the country from Boston to San Francisco and then had to have a 9 a.m. defense. So I wasn't prepared. I wasn't in the right place mentally or physically to be, you know, to be successful in that. So going into the second time, I spent more time, you know, making sure my design doc was a lot tidier, fixing a lot of the, you know, business-oriented mistakes, and, you know, spending more time practicing. You know, I had a lot more mocks my second time around than my first time around, and so when I walked into that room, I was much more confident. I knew my design much better than I knew it the first time, and well, I didn't fly across country the night before, so I actually got a full night's sleep, which is really important.
It's funny because I would say, like, for my second defense, I generally speaking prepared far less the second time, and simply, like, a lot of that was just time constraint. I had VMworld US, and then I had 2 European trips for work, and then I had VMworld Barcelona, and then I had another trip I think to Toronto. So
yeah.
And then VCDX, and so I really had very little time to prepare. So it was mostly me rebuilding a slide deck on a United flight across the ocean, and so I did maybe one actual mock. I did 2. I did one with Melissa where I basically went, my slide deck is horrible. I just rebuilt it. Is it still horrible? And she said yes. And then I had a second one probably 2 days before. And it wasn't even like a mock so much as it was like a design scenario. And that was with Paul McSherry. And then the night before my defense is actually election night. So I didn't sleep that well. And I'm still not sleeping that well. And, and that was actually me with CNN muted on the phone with Burkhart, going slide by slide, saying, like, this is what I want to say. Does that make sense?
It was awesome, too, because I kept on saying, are you sure you want to do this? She's like, yes, absolutely. Next slide. I'm like, you're ready. Like, clearly you're ready.
Basically, Burkhart was like, please, actually don't say that first. That's a really bad idea. And I was like, too late.
Yeah,
I already made up my mind.
Drop.
Yeah.
Preparation's a neat thing, and so Paul, you and I are the least certified. I'm the least certified of the group. You're closer to the start line for VCDX.
Yeah, I've got a ways to go. I'm still pretty far back on that one, though.
But definitely, when you hear about preparation, what do you think about when you think of the time commitment you're about to walk into, and when you say, I'm starting?
Well, that's the thing. That's something I've kind of been kicking around in my head. Is like, is this a path I want to follow? I've still got to achieve the VCAPs, so there's that whole step, and then move on to the VCDX. But and this is a discussion I actually had with Sean on the way down, I find myself spreading myself thin. like I'm looking at AWS, I'm looking at Nutanix. I've got to renew my VCP to keep that up to date.
Right.
Like, so do I want to focus that hard and streamline on this process, or do I want to kind of make myself a little bit more broad, a little bit more understanding of like the whole data center world? So I guess my question back to the panel would be, what has changed with the way you operate in your daily technical lives by doing this process? Has it really benefited you? Are you finding benefits outside of like, good recognition through the program?
Yeah. So I mean, like, there's a couple of pieces. Like, so I'll say, like, the first part is like kind of like what you're talking about, like going up the certification chain. Definitely after I got VCDX, I had like a little existential crisis where I was like, great, I did that thing, but now I just spent a year and a half doing that thing, and now I don't know all these other things. Like, what is a container? I missed that because I was so focused on one thing, but now I know because Eric told me today. So there's definitely that part of you that kind of shuts off the rest of the world to focus on the one thing, which is in this case VCDX. But in terms of opening doors, realistically, it doesn't, which is probably not what most people want to hear. But the problem is effectively we don't have enough VCDXs. We haven't hit a point. There's a line between having too few and then saturating the market, right? And we're at the part where we have too few, where realistically, unless you go to a company that has a VCDX or is VMware, they actually don't know what it is. So for a lot of vendors and companies, it's awesome when you stop and you explain it, and then they go, oh, I kind of get it. But I mean, I'm lucky where I joined Rubrik and they already had 2 VCDXs on staff, right? So they knew exactly what it was and what they were getting with that. But we need more. We need more VCDXs. So I hope more people pursue the certification. But I will say, like, the big thing that I got out of VCDX in terms of like studying and learning and doing things is it made me less VMware centric, which is maybe the opposite effect that they intended. But what you learn during the VCDX process is it's so much not about the technology. It's not about the actual nerd knobs. It's more about the process and the methodology and the customer, right? And the business and the requirements. And designing for that and taking that all into consideration, regardless of what the technology actually is under the hood.
I think VMware themselves have become less VMware centric. Really, you're not far off. The challenge will be, in my mind, my independent external mind, is that will the VCDX process get pushed as well as VMware themselves evolve? And I believe it should. The only question is, like you said, there's 257 now.
Yeah.
So it's a very unique and small subset of amazing folks. But, like you said, because it's there's underrepresentation versus the 500,000 customers, and how many people are VCAP certified? I forget what the stats are.
It's like
9,000.
Well, so the number.
It's like 2,700 or something like that.
Yeah, I was going to say it's 3,000 or less.
Yeah, so the number of VCAPs that are out there, there's like 5,000 VCAPs that have been achieved, but there's a lot of people who have multiples.
Yeah, I have like 5 or 6 of them, right?
Yeah.
So it's not an accurate representation of the number of people. It's the number of certifications.
So what I would say though is, in some ways, I disagree with you, right? I agree with you that it's underrepresented,
yes,
right? And I took a VCDX track that is extremely underrepresented in that I'm number 15.
Yeah.
Of that
17.
track.
I thought there was like 16 DTMs.
No,
is it really?
I'm number 15.
Oh my gosh!
Of all the people here,
Yeah.
Sean would know.
Yeah, I don't know. I got this.
So I'm in a very underrepresented track, but at the same time, like, so when I was going through my process to achieve this, I had 2 things happen. One is my wife told me I can't shut myself away for until I achieve this. I have 2 kids. I still have to be a father, so you can't just disappear. But the second is, I work for a consulting organization, so I couldn't just say, I'm only going to do Horizon and Horizon products that get me to this goal. So during that time, I had to learn AWS because I had to learn workspaces, and I was forced to be exposed to other products during that time, which led to some really nice jokes in my defense about, have you heard of Amazon Workspaces? But I think the big takeaways out of it, I see the world differently. Going into this process, I knew all the nerd knobs in Horizon, right? I knew what to tweak. I could set one up, two hands tied behind my back, blindfolded. So it wasn't a technical thing. It was really learning, okay, now how do I understand what you're asking for? How do I translate that? And then how do I give you something that's going to solve that? And knowing the tech to that deep of a level in some cases actually can hurt you because, well, you know really what all the drawbacks of a particular feature are, even though that feature is going to be the one that solves the problem. I mean, so it's kind of a mixed bag in a way.
It's probably definitely the idea is that it taught you how to think. It's the same way, like if you get a master's or a PhD, it's not that you're necessarily you could have a PhD in library sciences and you may get a job as a programmer, but you got taught how to think.
Yes,
right, and that's the interesting thing. You two, especially Mike and Sean, and obviously, Paul, you've got the same thing. You're in a consulting role in a practices group that does that. What about folks that are more single environment focused?
So that, I mean, it just depends on what your role and experience is. So, I mean, to build off of what John was saying, my experience was, being very technical, and then I moved to being a technical account manager at VMware, and that's business strategy and assurance of no shelfware and making sure that people have their entire solution and strategy going forward. So being able to be consultative and from a high level, help solve solutions is easy. But like Sean said, it helps you form this framework. You can use whatever methodology you want, but you're going to use one or some to get this entire design and this entire process down because you have 2 hours, right? So you have this limited time frame to show your expertise and mastery of it. So if you're single environment focused, if your focus is purely support, well, then there are some design aspects and some architecture aspects that you need to come up to speed on, and vice versa. If you're mostly business centric, that's a perfect place to start. But then you do need to know, some of the technical aspects to combine the two, because you will be asked about some of the nerd knobs. You're going to be asked wow, why did you select this HA over that? Stuff. I don't know. It's default. Not a good answer.
Best practices.
Best practices.
Yeah, it's best practices.
All of you need to
what
wash your mouths out.
All y'all.
All y'all. I think it definitely makes you a better technologist.
Yeah.
The process.
It does.
Well, what I think it teaches you though too is, one, you don't have to have all the answers, right? Knowing the products inside and out is actually, like I said, it's a bad thing in some ways, because then you actually can pigeonhole yourself because you become the expert on it. Pigeonhole yourself, you don't get pigeonholed. You choose to.
For those of you playing at home, you can get bingo now.
Yeah. Drink, take a shot. But at the same time, it also teaches you how to find the information you need. Because when you're in front of a customer, it's okay not to know the answer. It's okay to say, I'm going to get back to you on that. Then you just have to know where to look for it, who to ask. Sometimes it's not documented, and you have to know, okay, well, who do I ask at the company? Where do I get this information that I need to be successful? And the same is true in the VCDX process, right? When you go into that defense, you have no access to resources. So at some point, you're probably going to have to say, I'm going to have to get back to you on that. Let me write that down as a takeaway.
It's kind of hard when you're in a VCDX defense to say, we're going to put a pin in that, and we're going to take that offline.
Yeah. you can't. But
it'll end fast. Now, and that's the interesting thing. I was told, so I get to be the outside view of it, right? I watched it as Melissa went through it, and I watched as Melissa and Rebecca prepared for it. Mm-hmm. And I got to go through the mock sessions as an outside listener at home and live with Renee and a lot of the folks at the actual VMware site the day before. And the whole thing of it's just like presenting to a customer. That's what they tell you. It's just like presenting to a customer. I've never seen customers be so adversarial for 2 straight hours.
Tough customer.
I would.
But I think part of it is, I think part of the test, if you will, or the rubric for the exam.
3 times.
Unintended. But I think part of it is to see how you react to certain scenarios. Right? I don't think their purpose is trying to push your buttons or try and be the worst customer ever. I don't think that's what they're trying to do. But I think part of it is just simply to see how you would handle a customer, right? Because if they give you a number and they give you this title, then you're going to be in front of customers going, I'm VCDX number 243. blah, 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 right? So
right.
I think there are times where I think you can say, well, I'm not sure. Let me write this on the board and we'll come back to it later, or I'll find out the answer at our next design session, and treat it like a real customer. I think you have to.
The other thing too that I think I appreciate a lot about the VCDX exam is that not only do you present your own design and you have to defend that design to a panel of architects that are already blessed, but you also have to do an on-the-fly exercise that really shows, okay, yeah, fine, you can do a PowerPoint presentation that makes sense and gives us the words that we want to hear. Fine. Can you repeat that process?
Right.
Can you logically, within 45 minutes, show us that you could do the same thing, but in a different manner? So if you go with, let's say, a certain type of storage or something, they may flip it on you. You may have something different. If I go HCI, they may go 3-tiered storage instead, or whatever. So it's a really interesting way of proving grounds, right? But it is a very difficult process to go through if you approach it like you're a super nerd, right? So,
in some ways, that design exercise shows how can I get the important information out of you as the customer, right? Do I know what questions to ask? Do I know how to document it so it's understandable to that customer, right? Am I drawing squiggly lines on the whiteboard, or is it something that somebody could look at and go, okay, I understand what you're trying to do there, right? To go back to your earlier question, about that person who's in that single environment who wants to get a VCDX. Prior to becoming a consultant, I had worked in a lot of small environments, a lot of places where, you probably wouldn't get the type of experience to put together a VCDX design. And when I set the goal for myself to say, I want to get this, I want to be a VCDX, I looked at the job I was in and went, I could probably build a design here, but I'm only going to be seeing one aspect of it. I switched jobs, went, I probably could build a design here, but I'm still missing something. And then I decided to go into consulting because I needed to find a way to get the experience I needed. And I think for anybody who's pursuing a VCDX, if this is a goal you want to set for yourself, you need to take a look at your environment and where you're at and go, am I going to get the experience I need here? Because to really, I think, and you guys may disagree with me on this, but to get that experience, you need to be in multiple environments. You need to be in front of multiple customers. You need to know what questions to ask. You need to know, how do I design? And by going to consulting and forcing myself into a position where I was not comfortable and being put in front of customers and expected to ask those questions and have to kind of learn on the fly, I was, I at least was able to earn that skill set. And Mike, Rebecca, would you agree, disagree?
I would. I would agree. And to be honest, it's an expert level certification, right? The VCP is, barrier to entry. It's a tough exam in the first place. I'm not going to do it any disservice. I failed my VCP4 twice, right? Like that was a really tough exam. And then 5 and 6, on and on. I've actually gotten better at them as the years go on. But with, the VCAP is also a very tough exam, but those are, applied skills for the deploy. And then for the design, it is knowing best practices and knowing your silos.
There's
I know that word again.
You know what's funny though? If you look back, you listen to John Arashid back in the day. Probably a few years ago. He talked about the progression. This is like a VMTN podcast, probably about 3 years ago, and he talked about the progression of certifications. VCDX was not the most difficult exam. It was very distinctly off to the side to be about architectural decisions, not the most difficult. He says as far as difficult, the VCAPs were meant to be like the Iron Man of certifications, and the VCDX was a different track.
It's not comparable.
We saw it as like we have to look at it as a progression.
Yeah.
But it's when we think about how it was originated, you do have to think about what the mindset was in what you're attacking, and it's neat to see it.
Well, that's the interesting thing is that when you get to the VCDX level, you ostensibly should be able to write the VCAP design exam. That's you. because that's how am I going to design
You're about
things?
to write it in 45 minutes on a whiteboard.
Exactly, like that's me.
Well, let's not talk about the VCAP design exams.
No, they're getting better.
I don't know. I think having consulting experience is a plus. I don't think it's required.
Mm-hmm.
I think at the end of the day, if you want to be a VCDX and you study and you practice and you try hard enough, that you can become a VCDX regardless of what your technical background is. However, I will agree with Sean and Mike and say that having that consulting experience, dealing with multiple clients and different craziness, in the real world will arguably make the VCDX more feasible. And I don't want to say easier, because it's never easier, but it
gives you more exposure.
More relatable.
Well, and I think, to that point, there are people who have achieved their VCDX without consulting experience. Mm-hmm. And I should maybe clarify that, I live in northeastern Wisconsin. There's not a lot of very large companies where you're going to have an architect who works with multiple business units to design stuff with different requirements. So I looked at consulting as an alternate path. But if VCDX is something you desire to get to, and you are fortunate to be in a very large organization that has a dedicated architecture team, that's a possible alternate path, because then you can possibly do things similar to a consultant, where you're working with different business units, which are essentially different customers, and you have to find, you have to do the same thing that a consultant would possibly do to get those answers.
So the takeaway I'm kind of getting out of this last section here, and maybe we can come to a consensus on it or not, is you don't do the VCDX to get a job, because it doesn't really open doors yet. But you can really kind of change your job to help you get the VCDX.
Yes. Well, and I would say, too, that...
But, I don't think VCDX is going to make you magically make more money, or magically make you get, this job as a chief technologist at a company or something like that. But at the same time, it's never going to hurt you. Right?
Well, yeah, because I know plenty of people who see CCIE, VCDX. Like, they see these top level, and they just assume, do whatever you want. You've got this.
Yeah, you must be making tens of thousands of dollars a day.
$10 million a year.
The real issue is that getting a certification doesn't change the fact that you're an asshole if you are. So I'm
that,
ultimately
my friends, is the first
unemployable.
profanity dropped on the ExploreVM podcast.
Sorry. Please bleep that out.
I held my potty mouth the whole time.
I just swore on stage. So.
Sean's genuinely trying to make a point. We're being jerks.
Now I get one thing I would think good to ask is for the other side. I was a consumer of this as a partner in it, right? Like watching my wife go through the process and being supportive for her, and it was hugely important for me that she got everything she needed to get through there. What do you, as a VCDX candidate, ask your family, friends to do for you while you're preparing?
Ooh, that's a great question.
For me, I'm not married and I don't have children, so
High five.
It was arguably a lot easier in terms of I didn't have to justify locking myself away in a room for 6 months to study and write a paper. But I will say, definitely, it was more of an impact on my sister and my friends, of me being like, yeah, I really can't go do X this weekend, right? So yeah, it's just kind of an understanding that I can't go party anymore. Sorry, guys.
So, obviously the first thing, whenever you're going to bite off something of this magnitude, be it a VCDX or Virtual Design Master, which is season 5 is ongoing right now. And they got the shirt.
That's right.
Whoa. Where's my shirt?
Next year.
Wrong season. So, anytime you bite off something of that magnitude and that scale, the first thing you have to do is talk to your partner or spouse. Make sure you talk to them, you tell them what it is, and you work together to set proper expectations and proper boundaries, right? VCDX is a marathon, not a sprint, right?
Preach.
So if you're in a situation where you want to get it done, and you have a family, and you have commitments that make it hard or impossible or unacceptable, to sequester yourself away to just work on this nonstop, then stretch it out. Don't set I'm going to submit by this deadline. Go ahead and, work on it. Set a deadline 2 or 3 submission cycles out, right? Throughout the whole process, though, make sure you're communicating with your spouse. And spouse communication is something I'm not good at. My wife...
Yeah, there's a general life thing we should be good at. But it's particularly important in this case.
Yes, it's extremely important in this case. And you have to make sure you live inside those boundaries that you guys set. And your spouse or partner is probably going to set very strict boundaries to say, no, you're a parent. You have to stay with your kids, right?
Yeah, my experience is very similar to Sean's in the fact that I started right when I had a child. So, I'm lucky in the fact that my lovely wife, who is amazing, and I don't deserve her, clearly. Rebecca knows.
She's way too good for you.
Yeah, and I don't know how I married up a couple of notches, but anyway, she won't even listen to this. But seriously, like I'm so glad to have her for the fact that she was like, "Do this. This is for you. This will make you happier. This will make an achievement. This is another really big mountain for you to climb." And she also comes from a military family background, so I got lucky in the fact that her mindset is, "All right, you go do the thing. No big deal. I got this. I've got baby. I've got home life. You come back. Once you're back, you're dad, right?" But there's a separation, and just like Sean said, that segmentation of duties and being able to say, okay, these next 3 to 5 hours after 5 p.m. or whatever, those are mine. I work on the thing. And really, it is a marathon. It is a long process because you have, 100 to 300 pages of documentation to make. You have numerous amounts of diagrams and whiteboard sessions to draw up and to erase and to cry yourself to sleep on. I don't know if anybody did that. That's weird. But no, realistically,
not so much funny as it is hurtful and true.
Right, I know. Lay down, try not to cry too much, But no, like realistically, it takes a lot of time. It's a lot of iteration over iteration, and it's worth it, and it's worth the process. But you need to set that expectation with your family, your friends, even your employer. If you're in that single environment, you need to tell your boss or whoever that needs to know, like, look, I'm going to try this, and it's going to take some time, and I need some support, because otherwise you may end up homeless and fired. So like it's a tough thing. I hope no one takes that literally. I'm being facetious. So
and I'll chime in on the family aspect. Now, like I said, I don't have the VCDX. It's further down my path, but having the family support to do just about anything is huge.
Yep.
When I met my now wife, when we were dating, I was still finishing up my degree. So I was working 40, 50 hours a week and then going to school at night. And still, she supported that. It was all for it and helped me any way she could. And now it's like, okay, well, I want to go do these VMUGs. I want to go fly around and do these presentations. I want to, my job takes me away upwards, a week plus at a time. So, and it's an understanding, because that's how we're going to that's how our life's going to grow. Your career is going to kind of help steer the ship. It's going to help, us get into better things and more opportunities. And it's having that family support. And it can be tough at times, but that's huge. Somebody who's on board with all of that is awesome.
What's the biggest, I know we're winding up to a long run on this one, almost a two-parter. What's the biggest thing that holds you back from getting the VCDX? Personal, anything. Like, in my mind, what's held me back from reaching the start line is commitment and excuses. Like, I've always got a lot of things going on, so I personally haven't made the trade-off to make it a priority. And I've done it, and I could say it's because Melissa went through it. I could say it's because of my job. I have not committed to doing what needs to get done. It's my excuse, and I'm running. I own that. That's the reason why I haven't started. No other reason, not technical.
Yeah, for me, it's deciding which way I want to go with my career. When I entered IT, I was a Windows admin. Then I found this whole VMware thing, and I went, head first into VMware, and now I'm getting more into cloud and automation. Like, I've got to be able to focus on that specific task. So the commitment to the task and also the recent bump in cost is a little bit of a deterrent. I believe my employer would assist with that or pay that, but that's also like, do I want to put that burden on them? That's not a low cost anymore.
Right.
I think there's also the perception that you don't feel. I don't know. I can only speak from my own experience. There's definitely like a period of my life where my VCX partner and I had started our design, and then we kind of shelved it for 18 months before we seriously pursued it around the same time that Sean and Mike pursued it. But I think a lot of it was a busy schedule. So I think we didn't schedule well. We didn't give ourselves a realistic deadlines. And then I think the other piece of it was I didn't feel like I was good enough. I didn't feel like I was worthy. It's still, there are times like I got an email this weekend from VCDX at VMware.com, and it was about the town hall coming up at VMworld, and I was immediately, as soon as I saw the email, went, oh snap! They figured out I'm a fraud. They're taking back my number. Yeah. That was my first reaction. Where I was like, no.
But I like being one.
So I think part of that doesn't go away, but you just sort of have to suppress it and just move forward, and just even if you fail the first time or 2 times, it's going back, and I think persistence and attitude have more to do with it than anything.
Yeah. The other thing too, like to add to that, when you walk into the room and you've got guys that, you've read their blogs, and some of them
read their book and their VCDX number 2.
Yeah, their books, and you're like, oh, well, I didn't think much of my storage design, and I definitely don't now.
Now I'm genuinely terrified of my storage design.
and you gotta recognize the fact that like all of them were on the other side of the table. I know that's very cliche, but at one time or another, all of those panelists and all of the people that are judging you are just there to affirm that you have the skills to do that. To be a VCDX. It's not necessarily a process of becoming, although some people, I mean myself included, have a path and progression of becoming VCDX material. But once you get there, you're there. You know you can go in front of that panel. You can say exactly what you need to say to defend and adequately present your case. And it literally is like walking into a courtroom and saying like, not guilty, and this is why.
I object.
You're out of order.
2 really key points around that. One, think that somebody had to tell Albert Einstein whether they believed he earned his PhD, right? Somebody had to be there before him and let him know whether he earned that spot.
You're so wise.
Right? And then the second piece is, what do you call the person with the lowest score that graduates from medical school?
A big fat dum-dum.
You call them doctor.
Oh, wait, no,
right?
sorry, doctor.
It's a variable scoring, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the other thing, is there's whatever you're feeling coming out of that. I rarely run into somebody who's like, owned it, and walk out of there with their hands up and they're ready to go, and who will go. It's a very, very, you walk out of that room, and I saw the faces of people coming out. It's like standing at a marathon finish line, and you see them, they're like, like they're bleary-eyed, and no one walks out of that room confident, and rightly, none of us should. I would never think that I would feel confident coming out of that, but it's very good, and those are the observations that I have, and I would say anybody who walks into that is, like you said, they all walked this path before us and learned from them.
Yeah, I would say coming out of that room, I agree. You come out drained, you come out exhausted. You don't want to take a look at anything technology. Although I completed my 2 defenses, and I went to the Computer History Museum. So I decompress from technology with
a little bit of technology.
History. So
I think there's like a 24 to 36 hour, just like the greatest sense of relief you'll ever feel. And then the paranoia sets in.
Yeah.
I did awesome. Oh my god, I feel so bad. I did awesome.
And that goes on until you actually get the email telling you whether you passed or failed. So anybody who goes into this has to know. And in some cases, well after.
Yeah. Well, and just to wrap up too, it's not for everybody. VCDX is not for everybody.
But anybody could do it if they wanted to.
Anybody can be the president, but not everybody likes politics, right? Like,
anyone can be the president.
Yeah,
we learned that last year.
Yep.
Too real.
I could let everybody talk for hours, but a few of us actually have to go do our presentation shortly. So in our last minute or two, you have already thrown out a wrap-up point. Anybody else have anything to wrap up here with?
virtualdesignmaster.io. You want to test the ground. You think you're ready. You want to see how people go through the process and what it looks like from both sides of the camp, and find people that are going through this with you. You can check it out and see people that are kicking the tires on it. We've got a great community wrapped around it and the entire VCDX community, and we're all here. Everybody's here to help.
Reach out.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Virtual Design Master was my first start into any sort of architecture. I had never designed anything before I did that, and it was a great introduction. It was, got to work with great people who helped you grow, and you didn't have any well, you had pressure, but it was like you had a safe space to be under pressure.
Anything from Rebecca or
What Sean said.
She's too busy tweeting.
No, yes.
All right,
That's true.
well, then once again, I want to thank all of you for your time.
Thanks,
you.
Paul.
Thanks.
And thank you for listening. If you're going to VMworld 2017, stop me and say hi. Pick up an ExploreVM sticker, pin, or even better, let's record a short session for an upcoming episode. Until then, you can find me on Twitter at ExploreVM, Facebook.com/ExploreVM, or email me, paul@ExploreVM.com. Once again, thank you for listening.
We have so much in common.